At the end of last year, I made a video where I shared that everything wasn't rosy in 2024. I had a lot of upheaval and a lot of change, and all of that has led me to this decision that I need to drastically change some of the things I'm doing with my life. Easier said than done, as we all know. But I did mention that I would be much more open about that this year, and to be honest, I've struggled. I'm filming this on January 25th, and it has taken me this entire month to be able to sit down and talk about this. But this is my year of living bravely, and if I'm going to do that, I have to actually do it. I have to actually sit down and talk about the things that are hard. So now I'm going to talk about what it is that I'm doing to be brave. How am I facing my fears this year specifically? When I thought about what I wanted to call this year, I actually wanted to call it my year without fear because I thought it was really cute that it rhymed, but it's also not true. Being brave isn't about not having fear. Being brave is about having fear and doing it anyway. And it's so funny because I made a bunch of shorts last year where I said, do it scared, but I wasn't doing any of the things that would have made me scared. So I'm saying do it scared, meaning do what I'm doing, but those things don't scare me, they scare you. Does that make sense? And that's not right. I need to actually be doing what scares me, which is having conversations like this and opening up about myself. Because I genuinely really internalized this message that I was only as good as the work that I provided, or I was only of value to the people in my life for the things that I could do for them. And if you're in my life, please don't take that personally. I don't mean that you feel that way. I just mean this is a lesson that I learned early in life that I internalized, right or wrong, and have carried with me ever since. And I realized that that's actually how I've been operating, which is that people don't truly want to know me. People just want the things I do that help them or that are good for them. And as a service-minded person, how do I find balance in being truly myself when what I really learned was that helping people involves not being myself. I had to be less and less myself in order for people to listen to me. So this is me getting raw and talking about it, talking about what I'm doing to confront the things that scare me and specifically what I'm going to be doing differently this year in my year of living bravely. I know I've talked about the sixfold path and what I'm doing with Life by Design, but I'm not here to talk about Life by Design. I just want to talk about the dimensions of the sixfold path that I realized I was missing and that caused me to create it. Because I'm like, if I'm going to be revamping my entire life, of course, me being me and a Virgo, I'm going to create a whole framework and checklist out of what I'm doing and bring you guys along with me so you can see it. So I mentioned that most of what I did revolved around work. And even when it came to my creative processes, like writing books, that is still, I mean, I love it. And that's the creative dimension of the sixfold path, but it is still work. And I had let a lot of my relationships slip. I wasn't focusing on my spiritual side, and I certainly wasn't taking care of my health for a very long time. And the health was so hard to tackle last year. I remember when I went to one of my friends and had to openly say, and she did not understand why this was so hard for me, but it was. I had to openly say, I can't seem to get this under control and I need help. I think the way I need help is this. And she was so loving and so supportive. But what's funny is as hard as that was to do, that was like the easiest part of all of this. Because once I said it once or twice, once I got it off my chest, once I opened up to people, I'm struggling with this. They may not have understood why it was so hard for me, but they were so loving and so supportive. And my friend went with me to my doctor's appointment where I was able to talk about like what I was struggling with and how to get help for it. That's the kind of vulnerability that's hard for me, is saying I'm struggling with this. I have a problem. And it's hard for me even though I've been that person who's helped other people through the things they struggle with. But it can't be me, right? I can't be the one having these problems. But we all do. And if you're like me, where you're that service-minded person and you're there for everybody else, maybe ask yourself the same question I had to ask myself last year, which is, how am I being there for me? And how can I let the people who love and support me be there for me? How can I let other people take care of me the same way I take care of them? Oh my God, it's hard for me to even say that right now. Like, I'm getting emotional just saying that because it's so hard. I want to be the person that takes care of everybody else. But yes, the health journey was the easiest part of my reformation, as I'm gonna call it, but that also helped me in the other dimensions, because once I was brave about that, brave about admitting it to myself, brave about confronting it, brave about telling people I needed support, and brave about actually getting and accepting that help, suddenly I'm like, well, what else can I be brave about? What else have I just shut out of my life, assuming I can't do it? Those are the things I'm tackling this year. And there's more to the health journey. Like, that first part was about food and my relationship with food and going on a weight loss journey. The second part of it, though, is what I specifically do for my fitness activities. I have 2 long-term injuries. There's certain restrictions that go with those, but I finally got to the point where I'm like, I want to be brave enough to push the boundaries of those restrictions. And that's what I started in December. I'd already lost a significant amount of weight, not bragging, I got a lot of help, but I did. And that made some of what I wanted to do physically with exercise easier, that I didn't have that extra baggage weighing me down, literally. I was like, I really miss doing yoga, but because of my neck injury, I've ruled out yoga. And because of the horrible things I've done to my ankles, running isn't the best thing for me, but I miss running too. Honestly, I haven't tackled the running thing yet, but that's on the list. But what I did do is say, okay, well, what can I do with the yoga thing? I can modify the exercises, but a lot of the yoga videos do the exercise that's the worst for me, which is downward dog. It triggers my neck and triggers this injury. I had to stop doing it under my doctor's advice a few years ago. Long story. But anyway, so I was like, but I know what's wrong now. So what if I try it again and modify it? And I know the videos don't push me enough, because if I'm at home by myself, I can baby myself a little bit more than I would if I was in a class in public and like pushing myself publicly. I know, I'm one of those people. And so I realized that the fear I needed to get over was the fear of not doing things perfectly in public. I know, I can't even look at you when I say that, but that was my next fear I had to get over. I'd accepted I can modify this exercise to make it work for me. I hadn't accepted, but then people are gonna see me do that. But it was so important to me that I tried it. And I love that new expression of, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly, because it's so important to just do it, even if you're doing it poorly. I went, and in my first yoga class, I told the instructor, I was like, hey, I've got this injury, so I need to modify some of the exercises. She's like, okay. And it turned out all the yoga instructors at my gym, they actually keep giving the message of, hey, find the position that works best for your body. This is going to feel different for everybody. This is going to look different for everybody. I'd heard a lot of horror stories about performative yoga where people try to be like the best and do all this stuff. But the place I go, I didn't realize this, but it's perfect for me because it's so supportive. They're literally like, don't even look at your neighbor. Focus on your own practice. And this may look and feel different for you, and find what works for you. Later, they did fuss at me about something, which is hilarious because they're all so like inclusive and permissive and just do what feels right with the yoga poses. And then one yoga instructor fussed at me because I have the neck bolster when we lay flat on our backs. And she's like, you don't need that. And I was like, yeah, I actually do. And she's like, well, it's gonna get in your way later and you're gonna have to kick it aside. And I was like, yes, I've been doing that. I will kick it aside when it gets in the way later. But when I lay flat on my back, I need the pillow because of my neck. But it didn't even bug me. Does that make sense? Because I'd already gotten over the hurdle of being there and doing it. I'd already had the conversation with the instructors. So it didn't like wound me. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm never going back. It was fine. I was just like, yeah, no, I do need it. And I had the confidence to be able to say that. I had the confidence in myself to be able to stand on my own and, you know, stand on business basically and be like, yeah, I know myself and I need this. I don't know. It was weird that she pushed me on it. I still think it was weird, but it doesn't matter if that makes sense. Like, I still keep going. And I've been loving it. I'm doing the modified exercises. It's actually strengthening the injury. And that's one thing. And then I will work back up to running. But when it comes to the physical aspect, there's something else I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to be one of those people that can like backpack through the mountains and backpack through the forest. And when I was younger, whenever I would try and do anything anything outdoorsy, it was just so hard that I would just be like, I guess that's not for me. I guess I'm just not one of those girlies. I didn't even think, well, of course it's hard. I've never done this before. Or I was a super sedentary teenager. So yes, going out and doing anything physical is going to be hard. But it was like, oh, I have bad balance. Oh, I just internalized all these messages that it just wasn't for me. And I didn't come from a physically active family. So I had no role models. This is before the internet. I literally had no idea that you have to like build up to this. So I had this college friend who is amazing and still a very dear friend of mine, a life friend. And she would challenge me to go on adventures, skiing, sea kayaking, etc. And we didn't do them enough times that I ever got good at them, but we did enough new things that I started to realize I can do these things and I can get better with practice. And that's where, as an adult, I learned about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset says, I'm not good at this and it's not for me. The growth mindset says, I can learn and get better at this thing. And I've tried to apply that so much in my professional life. And so when I looked at my physical life, I was like, oh my gosh, I can do that here too. I know it sounds crazy, and I grew up on the West Coast, even though I live in Texas now, and I've always loved the Pacific Northwest too. And I've been watching these people like adventuring and hiking, like, the Olympian Forest or whatever it's called. I'm gonna get the names wrong. And, I've only been to Yosemite like twice in my life, even though I grew up in Northern California. So I'm like, you know what? That's gonna be a goal of mine. Later this summer, I am going to go with a friend or solo. I'm gonna go backpacking. I'm gonna go hiking through the mountains. I am so tired of thinking this isn't for me. Now, my ex-husband and I did briefly live in Portland, Oregon for like a year and a half, and we went and saw waterfalls and hiked, and I loved it, except for how cold it was. I loved it. So that's actually helped build my confidence a little bit too. But anyway, so one of the other things I'm doing is I'm doing more hiking, and yes, Texas is flat, but there are places with like hills and inclines, and I'm trying to train on inclines so I can work up to this. And then I'll start training with a pack. But this is really important to me. This is like a life where when you picture like what's your perfect life and what have you always wanted to do, there's a few visions that come to mind, right? The backpacking one is not the first vision that comes to mind, but it's on the list. And watching all these like YouTubers adventuring around, I'm like, yeah, of course I can do that. Of course I can. I just need to work up to it. So exploring the physical dimension of life, I call it health and wellness, but for this video, I'm saying the physical dimension because it's health and wellness is mental, it's emotional, and it's also physical. And I had already been doing so much for my mental and emotional health with journaling, with learning to open up and talking to people. This year, challenging myself physically, getting past what I previously considered to be my limitations is so important to me. I've even tried to film myself doing like yoga so I can have like a montage video for you guys. I don't know when and if that will ever happen because it's so embarrassing to see myself doing yoga on video. I can't film in my classes, obviously, but I do yoga at home sometimes to supplement. And Morgan, my cats always like to help me do everything. Morgan jumped on my back in tabletop pose. It was actually pretty funny. Didn't get that on video, but I'm trying. You can tell I'm delaying, right? Because the other thing that's hard for me is the spiritual dimension. So I grew up kind of vacillating between agnostic and atheist. I went to church camp with one of my friends in elementary school, and then I tried, Baptist, I tried a few other like Christian things, and they just never really vibed with me. Like I just couldn't picture it. But I have some really spiritual friends, some of whom are Christians and some of whom are not. And I do recognize how amazing spirituality is. And then last year I got really interested in watching videos about the universe and just really realizing how incredible the structure of our universe is. Previously I was a space girly from a sci-fi angle. My whole life I've been a sci-fi girly. But really thinking about the cosmos gave me a new appreciation for what I'm considering to be this like vast cosmic spirituality and an understanding of how little we know about anything. And that was my entry point to really understanding that I wanted to discover what my own spirituality is. Now, my parents were hippies, and my aunts and uncles, most of them hippies to some degree or another. I also have family on one of the reservations in Oklahoma. So in my family, there's always been this like kind of back to nature vibe. Aunt and uncle got married barefoot foot in Yosemite when I was a baby. Love this story. Love the picture of me there in a backpack with my parents as a baby in a field. It was beautiful. This is back before, I mean, Yosemite is a lot more structured now than it used to be. And, you know, my grandmother was a land surveyor and did the surveys for running a lot of the phone lines in California and cable. And my dad had that background as well before he switched to a more traditional job, you know, because he had to raise and support me. My parents weren't together when I was growing up. So I just have this like hippie vibe background, which I've never been ashamed of, but I've never dug into it, even though I do feel a connection to nature and the land. And I'm realizing that that kind of vibe is calling me back again, just a deeper connection with nature and the cosmos, basically, and really understanding that, you know, my own perspective on source, which a lot of people interpret differently, just trying to develop a point of view about what it means to me. But even saying point of view makes it sound like work. And I don't mean it like that. I don't want to go write a framework. And I mean, of course I do. There's a part of me that's like, oh, I'm going to go make a thing out of this. But that's not what's important. What's important is understanding my own connection to something bigger than me, letting that be a part of my life. So I have really started over the last few months diving into just researching and understanding different spiritual beliefs, different spiritual systems, commonalities, messages. I'd always earlier been interested in, you know, themes that were constant between religions, but really taking a different angle and just really understanding where I fit in with that. And I don't know how much I'm going to talk about that on this channel or how much you guys are interested in that. I actually started a whole separate thing for that so I can explore that in a community where that is also what people are interested in. But again, if you guys are interested, let me know because I can talk more about it. But that's also where I've learned to be cautious about things that are really important to me. And I think part of that was, you know, having most of my professional career in a very conservative area. And frankly, I worked in a lot of really conservative industries, utilities, banking, you know, finance, just a lot of conservative industries where for decades I basically learned to hide a lot of my personal beliefs. I have tattoos, you guys have seen them, but I can present one way or another. And I think what I'm working on for my future is learning to get over that fear of being open about what really matters to me personally, professionally, spiritually, and just being an integrated whole self. Because in the corporate world, and especially the more you move into leadership, we learn to compartmentalize so much. Our lives, our feelings, like everything goes in these little boxes, and depending on what your context you're in, you open up the box basically. And what I'm learning to do is open up all the boxes and put them together to make this complete, balanced, new version of myself. So that's the second thing I'm doing to confront these fears, these internalized fears. And I probably didn't express this very well in the first video because we think of fear as like, oh, I'm actively afraid of that. Or we think of it as anxiety or a phobia. But I'm talking about the kind of fears where you've internalized it so much that you just shape your life around avoiding these things, thinking I tried that and it didn't work, or that can't be part of my life, or people will judge me. That's all fear. It doesn't present necessarily as anxiety. Sometimes it does. But when you realize that you've avoided certain decisions or you avoid talking about certain things, you dig and you dig and you dig and you find out that what's underneath it all is fear, at least in my case. I can say, yeah, I was afraid of revealing myself. Yes, I was afraid that I would lose out on jobs or clients if I was more open about what I think about this. Yeah, part of me doesn't care if people don't like me, but part of being a consultant is people like you. And so, of course, I was afraid of too many people not liking me. And sometimes at work, that does have negative consequences, unfortunately. I don't want to be this partial version of myself anymore. So that's what I'm doing this year. And part of confronting that fear is opening up and talking about it with you guys and taking you on a journey of seeing how messy it can be sometimes to confront those fears. But one of the other big things that I am confronting is the fear of, well, if I talk about this or if I do this, I'm going to lose out on opportunities of some kind. There are certain topics I want to talk talk about for She Makes It Work that I keep putting off because I think they might be controversial. I said that what we're here to do is talk about the things people don't talk about. So I'm going to talk about them, even if that means I might lose out on certain contracts with certain companies. And that was the other fear in this family, this kind of professional fears, I'm going to call this like a family of fears, is the other decision I've made for this year is I am not going to do things I don't want to do because I think I should do them. We do a lot of things we don't actually want to do because in our head we're like, well, I should do that or I need to do that. I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to literally try to financially support myself by doing the things that I actually want to do and seeing if that works out for me. And I do have to say that some of my most organically successful YouTube videos are the ones where I got vulnerable and I talked about things that really matter to me, not just things I thought I should talk about. And on my other channel that is more on the spiritual and mystical side, that has been so quickly successful because I'm doing something I want to do, because I'm doing something I'm passionate about, and people connect with that. I'm more me there, and the more me I am here, the more people seem to resonate with that. I don't know, I think there's a lesson there. Why do things you don't want to do if they don't work anyway? Why pretend to be somebody else? Like I said in my last video, if people don't like that person anyway. I'd rather be liked or disliked for being me and for being open. And hopefully this helps somebody. I got a lot of messages after that video, by the way, a lot of private messages of people thanking me for that video and saying they were going through similar things. And that's okay that they don't feel like sharing that publicly. And maybe that is what I'm supposed to do. I've been getting a lot of messages along the lines of you need to be sharing your story more. And I feel called to share my story more because maybe that's the way I'm supposed to help people, not by telling them how to thrive in a corporate world that I don't want to be part of anymore. And I love my corporate experience. I love all the business skills that I have built. And sometimes I miss being work Gabby. But this year is about finding a way to still be work Gabby and be this new, more authentic Gabby. And being okay that the people who like me for the real me, and the people who don't like me, at least they're disliking the real me too, right? And just being more brave about that. So yeah, this year, like I said, I'm going to try and literally make a living and grow a business based off of only doing the things I want to be doing and see how that goes. See how that goes. That's a risk, yes. But that's what being brave is. Intentionally taking risks. There are a lot of things I can and should be doing with She Makes It Work this year that I just decided not to do. So anything you see me doing from today forward is something I'm intentionally saying, I want to do that, and I hope people want to do that with me. I'm not following anybody else's formula. I'm not chasing the suggested topics or trends on YouTube. I'm gonna make the content that I think is interesting, and I'm going to help, or at least I'm gonna try to help people by telling my story, because I'm realizing that so many people feel the same way, that they're living lives that they weren't necessarily meant to live, and making choices based on the shoulds in someone else's plan. Even though I thought I was living so independently and so rebelliously, in some ways I was, and in some ways I was still doing what I thought I needed to do. And I don't want to make it sound like I regret that. I learned a lot. I love so many of the things I accomplished. And this year, like I said, is how I figure out how to bring those things together. And I still really want to help people build skills. I really want to help entrepreneurs too. So I've launched my coaching packages because I genuinely want to share everything I've learned. But a lot of what I've learned is helping people in specific situations with like tailored solutions versus broad videos where it may only land with certain people. So my coaching packages are geared towards leaders and entrepreneurs and anybody in their career who's struggling with a specific problem and needs help with that problem. I can frankly consult them on that. It's not just coaching, it's consulting. I'm excited to do that. I really am. So that is part of what I'm offering this year. But I have this whole list of things I could be doing, but I've narrowed it down to what actually serves and fulfills me, while also fulfilling my purpose in being of service to others. And that is scary. It is scary. It is, I'm gonna admit it. But yeah, let's see if it'll work. Let's see if we can make it work, honestly. So thanks for watching this. And for any of you who are struggling with like life decisions, etc., we are finishing up our pilot of Life by Design, where we create a supportive community to help people design their lives intentionally, like I'm trying to do for myself right now. So we're finishing the pilot for that. And then as Q1 wraps up, you'll hear me start to launch the actual program for Q2. I'm getting a lot of great feedback from people. So it's kind of like I'm building the plane as I fly it, and that's okay. Because I trust myself to fly this plane. I really do. I've done a lot harder things in the past. This is just emotionally harder, not logistically. But yeah, thanks for being along for the ride. I hope that you find this valuable. Look forward to some upcoming topics, because the way I'm structuring She Makes It Work this year is bringing you along on my journey and trying to be vulnerable along the way. It is going to be Life by Design, where we build this framework together and help people through these life transitions earlier, because I don't want people trying to find meaning and purpose when they're 60, which is what is normal in our society. Why are we not doing this earlier? Why are we not learning to design our lives from the beginning? Why are we not teaching our kids to do this? Let's freaking learn to do this as a society together. Let's make a new culture of purposeful life together. You can tell how passionate I am about that. The third thing I'm going to be doing is talking about more controversial topics. I really do have a whole list of things I'm passionate about that I hope you guys are too, where we can sit down and discuss them together. There's a lot that goes unsaid, and I think it's time for all of us to be brave and talk about those things. Anyway, I really appreciate all of you who are here with me through all of this, and I hope we find more of us. But even if we don't, even if it's just a handful of us that go on this journey together, that's still super meaningful to me, personally and professionally. I'll see you in the next one.